meeting for the Open Space Greenways Committee. As you can see, we don't have many of our members here tonight. There's been some illness and sickness in the families, plus there's other people who are on travel functions. So to make a long story short, we do not have enough for a quorum, which means that we cannot make any decisions tonight, but there's some information that we do want to convey to you, and there's a presentation that's going to take place, so we are going to have an informational meeting. So if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, each of us have a copy of the minutes of the last meeting, and Carl, can we have a motion, or should we have a motion to approve the minutes, or should we defer that to the next meeting?
I think we should defer that to the next meeting when we have a quorum.
Okay, very good. Thank you. There be no revisions to the agenda except the confirmation of the chairperson. That'll be for the delayed until the May meeting. The other items that are on the agenda are for informational purposes only. I would like to make just a couple of comments. That there's we have one of our members who has submitted her letter of resignation. I don't know, maybe we can talk her out of it, but I don't think so. It's due to illness in her family. Pat Nielsen has decided to step down from active participation in the open space program for a while at least, due to the health issues in her family. Pat's a very valuable asset to our committee, and we're going to miss her very much. With that being said, I'd like to get right into the items that are on the agenda, and I'd like to introduce Mr. John Hartig, who's the manager of the Detroit River International Wildlife Refuge, who's going to give a presentation for us. So, John, if you could, thank you very much for coming tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me so much. And first thing, I want to thank you for. We had an opportunity a few months ago, and you supported us. We had an opportunity for a grant called the Federal Lands Access Program Grant. So it's out of DOT, U.S. Department of Transportation, and we, of course, own the Gibraltar Bay unit, which is down off of East River, and that grant has gone in, and if you can improve public access to federal lands, you can apply for money. So the Greenway Trail that you know on Grow Road goes east to East River, right? And sort of stops there, right? So if we were to get this grant, and then the Greenway would continue down towards Gibraltar Bay unit, go in there. And so people from the island would have better access to it through bicycles and everything else. So thank you for your support, and we have our fingers crossed. We hope we will get something like that.
Wonderful.
So we also approached the township about another idea, and you know, the refuge is still in its infancy. You know, it was established in 2001, but we've grown to about 6,200 acres, you know, of land, 6,200, and we have a memorandum of understanding with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources for about another 7,000 acres. We have cooperative agreements with Essex Region Conservation Authority across in Canada for about 4,000 acres. You know, really unique places like Holiday Beach, one of the 3 best places to watch hawk migrations in North America. And then about 1,000 acres from the city of Windsor, places like Ojibwe Prairie, one of the last tall grass prairies in southwest Ontario. So in total, we have about, 18,700 acres now in an urban area with about nearly 7 million people on a 45-minute drive. So it's pretty neat. It's and we are the only international wildlife refuge in North America. One of our goals is not only to protect wildlife and their habitats, but it is to bring conservation to cities. 80% of all the people in the United States and Canada now live in urban areas. Did you know that? 80% of all the people in the United States live in urban areas. So where's the next generation of conservationists going to come from? Where's the next generation of sustainability entrepreneurs going to come from? It'll probably have to come from urban areas. So there are 14 priority urban refuges throughout the country. Places like San Francisco, San Diego, the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Tinicum, and Philadelphia. Detroit River International Wildlife Refuge. Our goal is to bring conservation to cities and to make nature part of everyday urban life, trying to inspire that next generation of conservationists. So we've been, one of the things for this refuge that is different than many is that we cooperate with industries, with different levels of government, with non-governmental organizations, private landowners. So we do things on private lands to the benefit of both sides. So we've worked on these cooperative management agreements, a loose agreement between two sides. For example, with DTE Energy down at Fermi Power Plant, we manage 656 acres of coastal wetlands. With the University of Toledo, we manage Guard Island. With Lake Erie Metro Park, we manage about 700 acres, and that's where Hawk Watch is. With U.S. Silica, we manage some coastal wetlands at the mouth of the Huron River as it enters Lake Erie. So it's a really creative tool. And so I've been talking with some people in Grosse Ile Township, and one of the things is you have Manchester Woods, which is really an incredible place. And it's great stopover habitat right on the island here. And one thought is this is the first, we hope, of a number of discussions to explore the possibility of maybe a cooperative management agreement for Manchester Woods. There would be some benefits, Manchester Woods would be seen as part of the refuge, but the township would still own it. Obviously, you could leverage some of our, human and financial resources for projects. You have a very unique island community, and you could be seen as a leader in conservation for the region. It would be consistent with your welcome sign for the toll bridge that says "Welcome to a Detroit River International Wildlife Refuge community." If you read that sign, it says it right at the bottom. It'll also help us because it'll be a good example of how we can do it. It'll further this example of cooperative management agreements and help us do that. It'll also strengthen some of the partnerships between Grosse Ile and us for things like environmental education, universities to bring not only faculty members but students into the university. So, but we've got some realities. When I started this discussion about a year ago with the township, we were a little better shape. We've lost our biologist, Greg Norwood. He took another job, and there's a hiring freeze, so we cannot replace him. And we're about to lose our landscape architect, can't replace him. And our park ranger is going to go out on maternity leave. So being down about 3 people is a reality that we have to work through, And so this could have some ramifications in the near term if we were to do a cooperative management agreement. But, one of the things we could do is sit down and look at Manchester Woods together and think about what are the long-term biological and sort of visitor services, public use goals for the township and us together if we were to do this. We could sit down and do that in a very formal fashion. And one of the things, we would have some real interest in improving that area, right? And one of them is invasive species. We want to try to keep invasive species out and manage for more native species, and we could work on that with you. We could provide in-kind technical support to develop a work plan for both biological work in Manchester Woods, but also some of the visitor services, This plan would guide projects into the future. The work plan could also spell out finding a long-term solution to, some of the trail surfaces. Some of the wood chips bring in invasive species. We could look at different ways of doing that and protect that really unique woods that you have there. The refuge could provide 1 or 2 teacher training workshops for Grosse Ile teachers on how to use the space for outdoor education, an outdoor classroom for Grosse Ile students. We could provide lesson plans. Grosse Ile could be responsible for finding their own equipment to do stuff, and unfortunately, we would not be available to do any programming in the near term because of losing our staff. Grosse Ile Township would also be responsible for finding funding for some of the projects under this cooperative management, although we would help you. We constantly are looking for grant sources. We're looking for funding opportunities. We could send them. We can provide letters of support, just like we've done on the Federal Lands Access Grant. We could work in partnership on some of that. So, big picture, there's no decision that has to be made tonight, but we just want to throw this idea out of a cooperative management agreement for Manchester Woods. And we could get into more details later, but it's an idea that kind of fits with what Grosse Ile wants as an island community. It promotes conservation. It would be wonderful for environmental education for kids. We would just have to be careful because we've lost some staff and money is going to get tighter with some of the budget cuts. But we would be very open to exploring this with you in the future. It's nothing that has to be done now or tomorrow. This could be done over the next year. But as you know, we've done many projects. We've done 3 restorations of the Gibraltar Bay unit, the shoreline restoration with Bruce Jones and everything, and brought in money. We've got the Federal Lands Access Program grant, and we're hoping that we'd be successful. But this would just be another example of us working together. So that's the idea I'd like to leave with you, and you can consider that. And if you want to have a more detailed session about it, I'd be most pleased to come back.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. Are there any comments, Pam?
How did you happen to zero in on that?
Well, like I said, we've done about 6 of these cooperative agreements down at Fermi Power Plant and Guard Island, which is owned in Michigan by University of Toledo, and it's sort of logical. And obviously, we drive down Meridian every day, and we see the trail, and we looked on your open space map on the website and noticed that it's at least 200 acres. And it's just incredible, the woods and the stopover habitat for birds, and it's unique, and we're part of the community, and we thought it would be good to at least start a discussion with you. It's no, and if it's not right now, we can do it 3 years from now or 5 years from now. But it leaves an idea, and for everyone to think about. Okay.
Any comments, Mitch?
No, thank you.
Okay. Carl?
John, when you're driving down East River across from the Gibraltar Bay unit, on your east side you see what's known as Elba Meadows. It's between East River and Elba.
I know the
Boat
property,
Club.
yes.
Okay. That property has been flagged, and I'm sure Mr. Horvath could fill you in with a lot of details on that. But that has been flagged as an area that has some environmental contamination in that. Is there any possibility, since it is adjoining, actually contiguous to the Gibraltar Bay, that we could have some funding or some efforts to clean that up with federal money, grant money?
Those would be just like the rest of us. You have to apply for grant funds, and once you go through, so I don't know if it's a phase 1 environmental assessment and level 2, whatever you're going to go through, and if there's some significant contamination that warrants cleanup, you could seek some federal and state funds to do that. There would probably be none out of our budget because we're not in the environmental cleanup basis. And let me give you an example of that. Our big project for the last 12 years has been the former Chrysler site across the Trent Channel there, and that was a Chrysler made automotive brakes and paints and solvents for 44 years and took down the buildings and
Asbestos and all the
asbestos and
other.
everything. So we have spent 12 years chasing money, doing good science, chasing money to clean that up. And in some cases, we've had to do removal of waste. In some cases, for the asbestos, we've had to do capping. Chrysler put a 1-foot cap on certain portions of it. We added 5 foot of clay on top of the 1 foot, and then another 6 inches of topsoil, because you can't dig it all up times 44 acres and start all over,
Yeah.
So, but we have removed certain things out there, and we've restored 14 acres of wetlands out there too. So it's hard, but it can be done. And there are some pots of money at the state and federal level that you could go after, and we could talk about that issue another time.
Good.
Getting back to Manchester Woods as an example, John, have you had a chance to walk through that?
I have not
trail?
gone through the whole thing, but I've been in a little bit of it, and I would like to walk it. If we were to do something like this, what we do is a phase 1 environmental assessment. It's set up by, it's a very protocol to see if there's any contamination, like what you were talking about. Because if there is contamination, we could not acquire it. We could not do a cooperative management agreement. But we would search 25 databases over time, like electronic search of data on that site to see if there's any potential. We would look at the land use. We'd look at aerial photographs. Were there any industries out there? I doubt it. There was probably farming and everything else. But we would look at all that, and it's almost like doing our due diligence on the property as a basis for entering into a formal agreement.
In other words, you would, the first step would be for you to satisfy yourself. In other
Exactly.
words,
And
that,
we would.
that environmentally, it's a safe
It's clean,
place.
and that would be probably good for you to know that. It would be another opinion on that. So we would pay for that. That would be all on us. We would do that. Next step would, if we were to do a cooperative management agreement, is we would draft one and give it to you, and there would be a number of iterations of that going back and forth until both sides are signed. Nothing gets signed until everyone is satisfied, And but we've done this with corporations, with universities, with HCMA, Huron-Clinton Metropolitan Authority for Lake Erie Metro Park. So we've got some experience at doing it, and it's a great tool.
Well, I think we would be interested. But as you say, the first step is for you folks to make an environmental study of the area.
Yeah, it's called a phase 1 environmental assessment.
And if you're satisfied that the area is clean,
Yeah.
then we could sit down as a group,
Yep.
go through the area and determine what we want to do with it. What type of, in other words, we use it now as a walking trail.
Right.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And is there anything else that you could lend to as far as the educational aspect of that trail?
We would want to help you protect the unique habitats out there first. That would be our primary goal, to protect those habitats, conservation of them, and then to do public uses like the trails and environmental education and everything else that would not undermine the unique nature of those woods.
This sounds like a very good opportunity for us, and I don't want to lose that opportunity. So I'd like to at least maybe begin the dialogue.
Yep.
And determine when you would want to make the environmental study, and then,
Yeah.
take it from there.
So-
And when we could meet here at the township office and continue with our conversations and develop a plan.
Plan for that on what we would do, advise to do to protect the habitats out there, and what would we do to work with teachers to use it as an outdoor classroom for students out there. There would be some synergy between Grosse Ile Township and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
As far as Albemarle Meadows, maybe the same thing could apply to Albemarle Meadows, but I think that's more of an issue than Manchester Woods is.
Yeah, we have had to, because there's contamination on certain properties, we've not been able to purchase them. We cannot do a cooperative management agreement for obvious reasons, because we would be taking on, liability down the road then as well, but this would be a confirmation for you too. So this is just the first discussion of this, and we want to do more with Grosse Ile Township, and we think it's a unique opportunity.
Well, let's start the dialogue.
It's very good.
Good.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you so much for coming.
John, how do
Appreciate
you
it.
start the dialogue with that? We've got some nice concepts here, but how do we move forward from home plate to first base?
So if you want to, since you're not in a decision-making mode tonight, maybe the next time you meet, you would, I could send you something in writing about cooperative management agreements and stuff, put something in writing, and then you can think about it either with me in the room or without me in the room, and you can see if this is something you would like to pursue. If that's the case, then we submit paperwork to, there's interest from Grosse Ile Township, there's interest of Fish and Wildlife Service to enter into a cooperative management agreement. The first thing is we petition to do a phase 1 environmental assessment. Again, we would do all that paperwork, then we would do the phase 1. It's actually a whole report, and you will get to see it. You will be part of it. That has to go through, get submitted, and it has to be approved that there is no contamination or liability. If that's the case, we would go into negotiation on a cooperative management agreement. And some of the ideas I left with you, like, working with the curriculum of Grosse Ile schools to make it an outdoor classroom. Some ideas on better improving the trails from a habitat perspective. Some of the invasive species management work.
Perhaps the next thing that would be at our May meeting, we would formally approve the action to begin this dialogue, and then contact you. You would send us.
Send you something in writing, and then you can respond to it. And if
In fact, it was wrong. You send it to us in writing, and then we can. That'll be part of our discussion.
Wonderful.
And you can send it to either send it to my attention here at the Township Hall.
Okay. I have your email, so I know I can send it that way
I'll
too.
send it to me in email, whatever's most convenient for you, and then we can formally review it and approve it if our committee decides to do so at the next meeting, and then we can begin.
Very good.
John, another question I'd like to have you think about when you send the email to Cliff, and that is that the Manchester Woods open space has been purchased via funds from a millage. The millage is no longer on the ballot. We're no longer receiving any millage on the rolls. So that's one consideration as to what we can do financially. But what does the cooperative management do in terms of Grosse Ile's use and control over the property?
You would have use and control over it. You are the owner. You would have full, and then again, we would want to make sure, do we have what are our common goals? Like, you want to protect it from a conservation perspective. You want to protect the natural resources out there. You want to have some trails. You want to allow kids and families to go in there. We would explore those together. If you wanted to develop condos or something in there, obviously we probably wouldn't do that. But I mean, I don't think you have that. It was purchased with open space money. You want to do that. So, we have some biological technicians that could help with the level 1 survey and identify some of the unique things out there. I just don't want to overpromise that everything would happen right away because we're down in staff and everything. But I'm thinking over a 5 and 10 year period where we would enter into some of these things with you and to the mutual benefit of both sides.
You had mentioned the Chrysler plant over here, a chemical plant, if you will. And I remember when Daimler and Chrysler were having a marriage of equals, and it turned out to be anything but equal. And that's what I was looking at, was concerns about retaining local control. So I'm understanding that your program is more of supporting us, helping us to be better stewards and better use of the land, as opposed to going to the altar and getting married and having both of us manage the program.
So we would add value to what you're trying to do, help you achieve some of your goals, and and then it's a process that you go through. You can imagine doing this with corporations too, going through it, and the number of meetings it takes, and it doesn't happen in a short period of time, but it can be pretty special. Like in some of the coastal wetlands we've protected and conserved, you can imagine we've lost 97% of the coastal wetland habitat on the Detroit River. So that means what's left is really, really important. And then we try to have a net gain. So hence the Chrysler site, restoring wetlands out there. Some of the soft shoreline engineering projects, even at the Gibraltar Bay unit, some of that stuff. So that's, we're conservation and also kids, environmental education, inspiring a sense of wonder in the next generation.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have one more. Albemarle Meadow, yeah.
When I was growing up, now it would be.
That would worry me, because especially being the proximity to the Naval Air Station and everything else, and there'd be a lot of work that have to be done on that,
And then the Manchester Woods area, there's a very interesting handmade structure in there. That had you gotten deep enough into?
No, but I've heard there is something out there, and was it related to the farming? I don't know. See, this would come out in the Phase 1 environmental assessment, because we would actually walk the site with biologists, and we would do our due diligence and all of that. Is it like a
eventually becoming like a shelter, and if kids are out and they're examining the woods and doing a nature hunt, using that shelter as a place to get out of the weather?
Gibraltar Carlson High School did that very thing. We managed 350 acres of wetlands surrounding Gibraltar Carlson High School and the middle school there, and they built an environmental education shelter right next to our property so that the kids could have an outdoor classroom like we talked about, and they would have proximity to our wetlands and use it as a living laboratory. So, we could vision some things down the road. Sort of like if Humbug Marsh, the educational shelter that we built in the middle of the woods there. Grosse Ile could do something like that. Gibraltar Carlson High School got their construction trades class to build that for them. Isn't that neat? So teachers and students were working together to build that. That's pretty neat.
Just a quick point on that. I understand where you're coming from, but I've been around the trail quite a bit. The house back there, there's a collapsed tree. If we were to do anything, it would be almost better to just tear it down. There's not much that you can do building off of it, but I understand where you're coming from, and in the future, I don't think that would be a bad idea.
Okay. All right. We'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
Very much for coming, John.
Let's hope we get this flap grant. That would be pretty exciting for all of us, I think.
Great.
Okay.
Thank
Have
you.
a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the liaison reports, and we'll start off with the township. Carl?
And we're continuing to explore the options on the Ferry Road Gauge Trail that terminated with the purchase of the property by a new homeowner who is going to be building 2 homes. And we're looking at also what can be done to purchase with the remaining open space money. I think the township board has an interest in doing something with that money that has been in an account for a number of years. So Mr. Ream is looking at various options with that, but we have nothing definitive yet.
All right, we're going to skip. Bert is not here tonight, nor is Leah. Mitch, anything happening with the schools?
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Okay. Pam, beautification?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that we're planning to host the Southeastern Beautification Council, Southeastern Michigan Beautification Council, and we were going to use the education center over in Humbug Marsh, but that didn't work out because it's not going to be open. So I'm going to just pass down the line here. We've come up with a theme of historic preservation. We've got a gal on our committee. She's a gardener. She has her master gardener certificate, and she weeds at Four Corners, and she's also an artist. So she has designed an invitation which takes in the lighthouse. So I'm going to pass that down. You might want to just take a look at it. This is a minuscule version of the program, and it's since the theme is historic preservation, we're inviting John Wilkie, who took over the hangar and made it into a state-of-art township hall. He's going to talk about historic preservation. And we have several of the owners of the historic homes on East River going to speak. So this is a minuscule example of the program. And then the same member of our committee, Irma Slimko, she's an artist, and I think you'll enjoy looking at her artwork. We're going to raffle off a painting of the lighthouse. So there's that. This doesn't happen until June 15th, but we will have 50 to 100 people from southeastern Michigan coming down to the island, and we're going to serve lunch at the Ford Yacht Club, and part of the afternoon is going to be a tour of the island, so they'll hop on a bus and see some of these sites along in our historic district. And we're hoping to have the planting done at Four Corners before the Island Fest, which is now going to be the first weekend in June. So we'll be have flowers planted and looking good for the Island Fest and our upcoming hosting the Beautification Council.
Thank you. The next issue is public comments, and I think, Bill, you have...
I actually had a question for John.
Oh, okay.
Talk about a phase
You
one.
can get up. You can stand up here if you want. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm Bill Heil. We were talking here or listening to John Hartig's comments, and when we got to Manchester, that facility there, the idea was that they would walk through and look at things with what they are choosing to call a phase one study. My question would have been, would that include examination, tapping down into the soil or checking surface waters to see what contaminations might be there? What is the thoroughness of that first thing? We have, you were pointing out, for example, that Albemarle was a dump. And we also know that over the years, I wasn't living here then, I don't think, but over the years, many other people took many other places and dumped things. And it would seem reasonable, if everybody has to be practical about things, to look into that possibility there too. I mean, we would certainly hope for the best. I mean, this thing sounds wonderful to me. I had an idea as they were speaking that you might have these recorded stations along the way. People could have a guide and some earphones and learn something, and we'd charge a bit of a fee, get some revenue to help the open space program or the community maintain some areas. But it would all have to work right and have to fit. We wouldn't want any trouble because we overlooked something. And I just wasn't clear on what the extent of walking along looking at the trees would mean. Maybe a tree can tell you something about what's going underneath it if you have the right training. I don't know. But I was curious about that. Do you have any idea how far a phase one goes?
Yeah, my recollection on that, Bill, and it's been several years since I had to go deep into a phase one, no pun intended, phase two,
Right.
Is that you look for, are there open, obvious, essentially notorious items that would cause a reasonably prudent person to question whether or not there's some contamination there. That might be, as an example, depending upon the soil type that you have. Clay, as an example, is relatively impervious.
Right.
If there's a gas station within 500 feet or 1,000 feet, and the age of the gas station suggests that the tanks were in the ground, and
Right.
you've had an environmental issue with cleanup from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, that's an example of an open, notorious, probably something that would cause you to do the soil testing, the boring, going into a phase two analysis. So the first phase looks at, and if he's talking about 25 data banks and looking at historical photos and to get an idea what the use was, then that might be good. If there was a farm back there, it would not be unexpected that farmers would have also had fuel storage tanks So you may have had kerosene or fuel oil used to either heat some of the buildings there or to power some of the equipment.
Sure.
Those would be examples of things you'd look at and you say, well, that might be an area where you'd want to do the soil boring testing and getting into a
I forgot
phase
about
two.
those 25 data sources.
Yeah,
I mean,
which
to
is
me,
pretty significant.
That's going to be a lot of indicators to determine how thorough you need to be.
Yes. I would think that that would be something
If
that
there's
is
a history of shipbuilding on there or something, you know, you understand what I'm saying. And then you'd have it's an absurd example, but it would clearly illustrate a need for more thoroughness.
But if you have nothing that has really been there for 100 years, 80
That'd be
years, the
okay.
chances of that still being, assuming it was ever a contamination site, that may very well have remediated naturally or, unfortunately, drained and reduced the contamination levels to something that's
He'll
more
know how to
acceptable.
handle that.
Yeah. So the question is whether or not you have information that would cause a reasonably prudent person to suspect that that would be a
If you've got
reasonable.
25 data sources, they're going to be able to cover that pretty darn well.
Sounds like it.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you,
much, Bill. All right, and next, we have no actual action items that we can vote on tonight because we don't have a quorum. But there are a couple of announcements. The Dump the Junk program is still scheduled for the 20th and 21st of May. And Woody, who is recovering from surgery, is interested in taking that program on again. So we're looking forward to that. And also, to the members that are here tonight, Woody's going to be asking for volunteers to help with the event on Saturday and Sunday. As far as the ferry trail issue, I think, Carl, you touched on that. And just to give you an update, we did have a study session last month, and we are actively looking at options for providing egress from the trail through Ferry Road and or extending the trail throughout the open space. It's kind of a slow process. We've made some progress, not progress, but we've at least looked at one of the options which proved not to be feasible. Won't get into all the details because it involves a private person, and we're looking at another options. And the only thing that we can report to you is that we are going to do something. We don't know exactly what. It all depends on our success in contacting other people who might be able to provide access from the trail to Ferry Road. The next item is the spring review of open spaces. I'm going to ask all our committee members is to look at their areas and determine if there's any maintenance work that needs to be done, like Pam for the playscape. Mitch, you and Lenny work for the Manchester Trail. We'll be looking also at the wildlife sanctuary and the other open spaces, the Centennial Farm trails, to see if there's some maintenance work that needs to be done after the ravages of this past winter. So I'd like to now just start off at the end of the table. And Carl, is there anything else that you would want to talk about?
No, I have nothing further. I see that Tom Snyder stepped in. I don't know if he had anything he wanted to.
I have nothing.
Nothing here.
Pam?
Just a personal note, I understand the apartments over here that have been considered hazardous for many years are coming down.
That is correct, Pam. The demolition work on that started a week ago, and after a number of years of intensive lobbying and pressure, litigation in the circuit court has resulted in the demolition of the buildings, and it's expected that that'll be completed here within the next several weeks.
And that was my first home when I was 6 weeks old.
Well, you better go back down there real quick, Pam, and get a photo.
I thought I'd take a little side trip and see what it looks like now.
Don't be taking any bricks or anything else.
Again, I want to apologize for the fact we did not have a quorum tonight. It was through no fault of our attendees. They told us ahead of time that they could not be here. Woody had his surgery, and Pat Nielsen, God bless her, has got some issues that she has to deal with. So, having said that, I guess we can call the meeting to a conclusion. I don't think we have can we formally close it, or
Just our thoughts and prayers for both of those fine people, Woody and Pat's family, and would hope to see them in the community very healthy and very soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Move to adjourn?
Yes. So moved. All in favor? Aye. Meeting is closed.